Hi, Hans. Can you hear me? I think you're muted.
Yep.
um, I just wanted to let you know that in the pre-training for the meeting, we're just asking that when folks need to make a comment or would like to participate, that they use the hand up emoji that's available. Do you know how to do that?
I do not.
So I believe it's under the participants. I don't get that option myself as a co-host, but if you pull up your participants on the bottom and look on the right-hand side, is that option available to you?
Yep, I see it.
Fantastic. So this will help, using that hand up emoji is going to help the chair to be able to call on folks in order. And we'll just ask that you unmute to share your commentary and discussion and then put yourself back on mute, if that makes sense, just so we don't get a lot of feedback.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, this is John Newman. Hello, this is John Newman.
Hello, John Newman. This is Alicia with the City of Missoula. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Alicia, how are you doing?
Good. We are just about ready to get rolling here. We're still waiting for a couple of people, I think, to call in. Are you familiar with Zoom and using the little hand tool?
I sure am.
Fantastic. I figured. So that's what we'll be using for the chair to acknowledge different board members when they want to provide commentary and discussion or ask questions. So just use the hand tool, and then when you're called upon, you can unmute yourself. And then when you're done, please remember to put yourself back on mute, just so we don't get a lot of reverberation and background noise.
10-4. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Keenan, your mom says hello. Hello, friends. We're trying to name people as they enter the Zoom, and we have a gentleman with the name Angela. Help me out. Who is that? Somebody's got white headphones in.
I assume that's Patrick Brittingham.
Okay.
His wife's name is Angela.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry, I just was having some trouble with my speakers. I just heard you right when you said white speakers. Yep. Hi, Patrick. I'm here, not Angela.
Okay, we'll get that fixed. Thank you. Sandy, I believe with Sharon getting on, we have everybody that communicated with us that they were planning to attend. Let me just check with my cohorts and make sure that we're live streaming successfully, and we'll give you a green thumbs up to go. So just hang tight. Okay, Sandy, whenever you are ready, we are ready for you.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm new to this all, so hold bear with me here. Welcome to the Board of Adjustments meeting of June 24th, 2020. All the meeting body members are attending from a remote location. We are holding this meeting virtually, so we'll be doing public comment a little differently than usual via a live call in the phone line. Just like calling into a radio show or to make a pledge during a telethon. I'll call for general public comments, and on that item, I will take comments on items that are on the agenda and items that aren't on the agenda. I will also open the public comment phone lines on each agenda item. Each time we call for public comment, we'll put the numbers on the screen and for you to go to your phones and call in, but you may want to write them down. When you call in, you'll be placed into a waiting room, and I will take calls in the order that they come in. When I call on you, please mute your TV or computer, or there will be an echo. Tell us your name and your comment. Please be aware there is a delay of about 50 seconds from what you are hearing at home and the actual meeting. So it's okay to begin speaking right away when I call on you. I'll be observing a speaking limit of 3 minutes so we can hear from everyone. This public hearing is formal. The oral testimony given is recorded by the board secretary and serves as the record of the hearing. In addition to the testimony, the record will include any documentary evidence submitted by the applicants and the opponents, if any. This is the procedure we will follow. Developmental staff will present its report on the variance request. Then the applicant shall give its presentation. Following the applicant's presentation, the board will hear from anyone supporting the applicant's variance request. Thereafter, the board will hear from anyone opposing the application. The public hearing will then be closed and the board will discuss and vote upon the application. 4 conditions are required to grant. Of the zoning ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty owing to conditions which are unique to the property. The zoning variance must be the minimum necessary to provide relief from the unnecessary hardship. The zoning variance is generally inconsistent with the overall purpose of the ordinance, and the zoning variance reflects in substantial justice being done, considering both the public benefit and the individual hardships. The burden of establishing all 4 of these conditions rests with the applicant. The majority vote required to obtain the variance means that 4 board members must vote to grant the variance. This board is a quasi-judicial body. Appeals of decisions of the Board of Adjustments are filed directly with the district court. Hold on a minute. I'll get to my next spot. Therefore, let's get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call of the members to determine who's present, please?
You bet. Sandy Mitchell.
Present.
Sandy is present. Patrick Bredegem.
I'm here.
Patrick is present. Hans Hoffman.
Present.
Hans is present. Lance Koch. Lance is not present. John Newman.
Present.
John is here. Sharon Gordon.
Present.
Sharon is present. James Sage. James is not present. Caitlin Hepburn. Caitlin is not present. Don Briggs.
I'm here, present.
Don is present. We have achieved quorum, and in the absence of a regular voting member, we are installing Don Briggs, alternate number 2, as a voting member this evening.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to approval of the minutes from April and June. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes, or are there any suggestions, corrections?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. That will be for, do we need to do them individually, or will that just suffice for April and do another vote for June?
That sounds good.
Okay, the minutes have been approved as presented. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which are public comment for any items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? If you could please just phone in with your comments and I will acknowledge you. On the agenda, and that is staff announcements. Do we have anything, staff?
Just one announcement that there will be no board meeting next month.
I'm sorry, my computer broke up. Could you repeat that for my benefit, please?
Or there will be no Board of Adjustment meeting next month.
Okay. If you do have comments, again, you'll be placed in a virtual waiting room and admitted into the meeting in the order received. You can call 1-253-215-8782. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to navigate here, as is everybody else. Okay, can we begin with the presentation from the Missoula Housing Authority?
Emily, do you present first or do we?
I think I present first and then you'll follow.
Okay,
Right, the staff will present first, please.
Sure. So
Okay.
let me share my screen. All right. My name is Emily Gluckin. I am a planner with Development Services in the city of Missoula. Today, I will be presenting a request from Keenan Witt on behalf of Blue Line Development and the Missoula Housing Authority for setback and height variances to the Villaggio Apartments affordable housing development. This project includes a 200-unit multi-dwelling development that consists of 2 buildings that are 5 stories each and an underground parking garage. The subject property is located on the corner of Otis Street and Shakespeare Street. It is within the North Side neighborhood. The property includes a portion of the Beacon Street right-of-way that was vacated during a right-of-way vacation process in 2018. And the subject property abuts I-90 to the north. The Missoula growth policy recommends a land use designation of the subject property of open and resource land. This designation is intended to protect resource areas or areas with natural hazards. And the growth policy recommends that development that occurs on parcels with this designation be grouped or clustered to minimize disruption of natural resources. The subject property is located within the North Reserve Scott Street Urban Renewal District, for which there is a master plan. This master plan designates the subject property as being within the Scott Street District. The goals for this area include expanding residential and creating a cutting-edge live-work neighborhood environment. And this master plan recommends multi-dwelling development in that location. The subject property is zoned M1R2 limited industrial residential, which requires a minimum of 1,000 square feet per dwelling unit. And encroachment into the Scott Street right-of-way to the east creates a zoning parcel that contains both M1R2 and RM145 residential zoning districts. Per Title 20 in split zoned parcels, the more restrictive zoning is required. Therefore, the RM145 zoning district is applied to the parcel as a whole. The allowed residential density is the same for both districts, and the required setbacks for the RM145 district include a 20-foot front setback, a 10-foot street side setback, a 5-foot interior side setback, and a 20-foot rear setback. Finally, the maximum allowed building height in the RM145 district is 45 feet. From looking northwest from the corner of Otis Street and Scott Street, or the Scott Street right-of-way, this shows the steep slope that exists on approximately half of the site in the north and east portions. From the perspective of Otis Street and Shakespeare Street looking east, this shows the flatter portions of the site that exist in the west portions. The surrounding properties contain a cemetery to the south of the subject property across Otis Street, and a multi-dwelling development to the west of the property across Shakespeare Street. The applicant requests a variance for portions of Building A, which is shown on the west side of the property, to encroach into the street side setback of Shakespeare Street and the front setback of Otis Street. These are labeled A through D on this graphic. The request also includes a portion of the Building B on Otis Street to encroach into the front setback. These are labeled E and F. And the applicant states that the purpose for these encroachments is to accommodate, These encroachments are requested in order to locate portions of the structure on sections of the property that are flatter and located away from the steep hillside. Here's a closer look at building A. The sections that are encroaching into the 10-foot required street side setback vary between 4.5 and 9.5 feet into the setback. And the section that it encroaches into the required 20-foot setback on Otis Street will encroach approximately 8.7 feet. On building B, the portion of the building that will encroach into the front side setback will encroach by 8 feet. And the section that encroaches into the Scott Street right-of-way will encroach into the required street side or front setback by 8.5 feet. And in general, this encroachment into the Scott Street right-of-way is currently being reviewed by city engineering as part of a requested right-of-way encroachment permit. The applicant is requesting a maximum or a variance to the maximum 45-foot allowed building height of the RM145 district. Both building A and building B are proposed to be 63 feet tall. This additional height is requested in order for the applicant to provide 200 dwelling units, which is the minimum amount of dwelling units required to maintain affordability standards. 8 notices were mailed to adjacent property owners as part of this process, and Development Services received no written public comment. Development Services did receive several comments from agencies that were notified, and these include the Office of Housing and Community Development, which commented in support of the variance request and provided the information that there are more than 2,000 eligible households within the city that these affordable units could house. The Missoula Redevelopment Agency commented in support of the variance request, stating that the project is in line with their goals outlined in the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan. And the comment also included that the MRA board recently approved tax increment financing assistance to the Missoula Housing Authority for this project. And finally, staff received a comment from the Missoula City County Health Department, encouraging radon-resistant construction for both buildings and encouraged incorporating active transportation options into the development. Staff reviewed this request based on the review criteria of 2085-090G in Title 20, and these are listed on the screen here. So for the first criteria, it was determined that the strict application of Title 20 creates an unnecessary hardship due to the steep slopes that exist on the site and which constrain where building can take place. For the second criteria, the 6 encroachments into the setbacks occur in very limited portions of the buildings between the 2 buildings and demonstrate the minimum variance required. In addition, the increased height allowance will not impact the surrounding properties due to the steepness and proximity of the slopes and the way that the building would be oriented to the surrounding structures in that area. And this requested height is the minimum variance required in order to accommodate the 200 units proposed. Third, the variance requests are consistent with the zoning ordinance. First, to protect and promote public health, safety, and general welfare by clustering development on the flatter portions of the site and away from the hillside. And second, it implements the goals of the growth policy and other adopted plans, including the place to call home housing policy, by increasing the supply of affordable housing units within the city. Finally, it was determined that the creation of affordable multi-dwelling units in this location is a public benefit to both current and future residents of the city, and that the requested variance allows for clustering of development at the same density as what the surrounding zoning permits, and that the project will comply with all other municipal requirements. This slide shows the recommended motion by staff, which is to approve the variance requests.
Okay, thank you, Emily. If there are comments from the public, the phone lines are open and we'll take comment after this report is finished. So our meeting, and then we'll put the call numbers on the screen now. And I'll read some of them for the phone. 267-831-033 and 1-888-475-4499. The meeting ID is 960-049-3694. We will answer the calls in the order in which they are received. I will call on you by your phone number. Please be sure to mute your TV or computer. Tell us your name and what is on your mind. I'll be observing a speaking limit of 3 minutes so we can hear from everyone. Be sure to mute your TV or computer when you are speaking to avoid an echo. Are there comments from anyone supporting the approval of the presentation? Hearing none, are there any opposed to this presentation, to the variance? Okay, here no public comment. Are there any comments from board members or questions? If you could please raise your hand. Question, and that is when I saw 500 or excuse me, 200 units, 1 bedroom and 3. And I was just wondering if Low School had been approached about the possibility of their student population doubling. Okay, first I will call this Hans.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment, please?
Is there a representative of Villaggio on this call to answer questions?
Yes, you've got Jen Clary with Encompass, and then Keenan Witt is with Blue Line, and Lori Davidson is also on with the Housing Authority.
Okay. I've got a few questions. Is there a reason why the Scott Street right-of-way was not vacated like the Beacon Street was?
Yes, you know, that's something that we definitely looked at, was do we just do that, or do we go with this encroachment idea? And really it was the collaboration with the city and, you know, the developers and us kind of talking about what is the best move here to do that. We don't ever see that there'll ever be, you know, Scott Street extended there. And they felt like, you know, this was a more simple way to go about this, is just to do the encroachment into that right of way.
So you're saying the city recommended doing the encroachment rather than the vacation, even though they did the vacation of Beacon Street?
Right, that's correct. It's really just kind of all of us putting our heads together, trying to figure out what was, you know, the best way to do something like this, what's needed. And, you know, it was a recommendation, I believe, by them to say, hey, what if we did this scenario instead? Keenan may have more to say here on that one, but that's how we felt about it, that it was working with them to do that encroachment.
I do have some comments on that. So the adjacent property owner on Scott Street is in California, and we were marching down this road right as COVID was really starting to ramp up, and we knew we had to keep our project going. So I worked with Mary McRae and with Ryan Sutterberry at the city to come up with a way around the constraints of being able to access someone who's retired in California during a pandemic. And so this seemed to be the path of least resistance, where we could still work within the constraints of the site and get 200 units built.
Why the number 200 units?
So this project is funded by 9% low income, or I'm sorry, 4% low income housing tax credits. So under a 4% model, we use bonds, and for a 4% project, we went this route, number one, because it's less competitive than the 9% credit in the state of Montana. That's a very competitive tax credit. It's not a sure thing. And I think Missoula has definitely, if you ask some folks around the state, had their fair share of 9% credits. We didn't want to compete. We wanted to free that up. We knew we could get 200 units on that site, and we could make the underwriting work, and we could serve the greatest need. These are 2s, 3s, and 4 bedrooms. There are 32 of these units have project-based vouchers for the very low income. So we were really, like, if you look at the housing and policy, we need a lot of units in Missoula. This was a way to take a big bite by not going, not leaving our chances, you know, to the 9% round, which is much more competitive.
I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with 4%
Right.
and 9% vouchers or tax credits, as you said. So are you saying that if you had fewer than 200 units, you would not be eligible for the 4%?
No, so the way the 9% credits work, it's a competitive round in Montana. They usually fund smaller unit counts. The 4% is a non-competitive bond. So we were able to go a less risky route with this creative partnership with the housing authority and with a for-profit developer in town who owned the land. And this was a way for us to put all that together, and 200 units was realized through the model, really through the underwriting.
And this is Lori Davidson. I would add that you cannot build this many units with 9% credits. Those credits only go as far as building maybe somewhere between 26 and 40 units at a time. And we were really wanting to have a bigger project. The 4% credits aren't possible. It's not possible to use them in Montana unless you get this scale of a project. The rents are too low. The construction costs are too high. You must have enough units that you can actually collect enough rent to pay the debt service on the project. So this was the only way that we could fund a project of more than 40 units in an affordable project in Missoula.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the 200 unit number was arrived at due to financial constraints, not due to any legal restrictions.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes. Yeah. That's how many we need to do to make this funding source feasible.
Right. If they went down to 199, 198 units, this would not work.
I also think it's important to point out that in the state of Montana, we don't have a lot of the soft sources to build, you know, a capital stack for 200 units that a lot of other states like Colorado and some of the more, you know, have a more tax base, number one, but have some more creative tax revenue. So we have to get creative here. And this was a way that we knew we could access some local funds like TIF, because we're in an urban renewal district. That was a big chunk of our capital stack, and being able to actually make this a buildable site. So the 4% was the safest route to being able to take a chunk out of the 546 units that the housing plan designates that Missoula needs for this population.
And the Missoula Housing Authority, in order to, at one point we were only going to have 24 vouchers there, but in order to make this feasible, we had to increase that number to 32. We're happy to do that, but we have to be judicious in the way that we allocate vouchers to projects. the vouchers are critical to the affordability of the project, as well as the 4% tax credits and the bond financing and the other sources of soft money that we have access to.
I feel like I'm monopolizing time because I had a whole list of questions. So, but I'm just going to keep going. The next question I had was regarding the two different zoning regulations that apply to this plot, the industrial versus the R145, and I wanted to know if the building specifications fit within the industrial designation. Are the setbacks sufficiently smaller and the height restrictions sufficiently greater to allow for that?
I can answer that definitely. When we went for the encroachment versus the vacation, that kicked in the RM 145. So before we have the M1 R2, there's no setbacks, and it's a 50-foot height limit. So obviously that hillside, I'm sure you've looked at that. It's very steep right there. We're trying to stay away. There's basically a base point that we want to stay away from, and that's why we've wrapped building B around that a little bit. And then we can push A as far as we can over there, because before we had 0 setbacks and that was okay. So we would like to have that, driveway access between the two buildings, and that's for emergency vehicles, fire, rescue, to get around our site and get behind that site as best they can with that hillside. So that was all, in that planning stage of trying to lay this site out. But that is why now we have a setback. We knew we'd have a height issue with trying to get 2 buildings on this site, but the setback became about, working through like what Keenan described, trying to get the gentleman who owns the land adjacent, and it just became very difficult, and the city helped us work out the encroachment. So that's why.
So what portion of the site is on R145 and what portion is on the industrial?
So because we're encroaching building B, and that site description that we have where there's a large hatch, right? And I think it was like F is what we had labeled that. That is all the area that's encroaching into that right of way, which is why that's why we have to adhere to the RM 145, because that adjacent zone is RM 145.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, then were you guys able to do the Scott Street right of way vacation and get that included with the industrial zoning, then the only restrictions that you would be going past are the height restrictions. You would be 13 feet over the height restriction. Other than that, everything would be within the zoning regulations of that industrial.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, Mary McCrae, did you have some comments?
Yes, this is Mary with the City of Missoula Development Services. It would be a little complicated to vacate that portion of Scott Street. It would have taken more time, and it would have required a rezoning along with it, because Title 20 doesn't allow you to create a split zone parcel. So the Scott Street would get added to the main parcel and it would be split zoned. So that was the other reason we went the route, or we recommended the route of the encroachment. And city engineering is reviewing the encroachment and have given us notice that they will approve that encroachment. They're going through their process and it should be approved by the end of June.
John Newman, you had some comments, please, or had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm in support of the variance request for the reasons stated in the staff presentation, most notably the topographic constraints on the site and the portions of the growth policy that are served by this particular variance request, most notably affordable housing concerns. And that's the extent of my comments. Thanks.
Well, I haven't heard an answer to my question about the schools. Is that a concern? Am I the only one concerned about the number of children that will be now at Lowell?
So I can address that. I'm sorry. I went there and then the questions kept coming. As part of our funding sources, we have state home funds in this and city home for that matter. It does require an environmental review process to take place, and that has to be approved by HUD. So that has been completed, and within that environmental review process, they look at noise, they look at school capacity, they look at transportation, they look at environmental concerns. It's everything. So that has been completed by the city of Missoula and signed off on by the state. So now HUD, we're waiting on HUD to give us our final approval, but we don't anticipate anything there. We've received no negative comments through that environmental review. It's been published a few times in the Missoulian that we were undertaking that process. So we feel confident that we've done what we need to assess those kinds of impacts of 200 units in this neighborhood.
We've also held public meetings, and that neighborhood is a particularly active one, and all of the comments that we've received have been positive. So we were really encouraged. Many of them were really looking forward, and sort of surprisingly enough, the people who live in the single family dwellings that are right across the street that are up the block from there, we heard really positive comments for them. They were excited about the project coming in. So.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Are there comments or questions from any others?
Hey, this is Patrick.
We did have a comment come in. But I'm not sure whether they were concerned about this project or just Northwest Energy. Seen it, I will read it to you, and it basically says, Northwest Energy, how do I tell my 5-year-old niece that our state and the world she is growing up in were destroyed because you were already making huge profits off the natural resources of our land? But it wasn't enough. You had to have more right now. And you couldn't support even minimal measures to delay the damage, giving us disease, pollution, wars, and futile migrations of mass numbers of people just looking for food and peace. I know you don't want to listen to climate hero Greta Thunberg, who keeps close watch on these things. She says even the Green New Deal is too little too late. Put it best, use your expensive devices, check the world weather. You will see record temperatures in Scandinavia, in Siberia, in the Canadian Arctic, and in Alaska that approach 100 degrees in a growing number of locations in June. What does it take for you to see what's in front of your face? And I'm not sure if that comment had to do with the fact that some of the reason for moving or placing the buildings were because of the power lines, or just a general public comment. But do we have any other comments from
Patrick? Can you guys hear me?
Or from attendees?
Sandy, can you hear me?
I can hear
perfect.
you.
Okay, this is Patrick. I just had a couple of questions. First of all, what is the purpose of those setbacks from Otis and Shakespeare? I mean, under those zoning regs, under the RM zoning regs, is the purpose visuals, or is there some other?
I believe that it's visual. Does anyone else have a comment?
Typically, visual safety. Sometimes in residential zoning districts, the setbacks are to coordinate where buildings are placed in relation to each other for light or noise or things like that.
And I'm somewhat familiar with the area. The use on Otis and Shakespeare, I guess just trying to characterize that level of use, it seems like that portion of Shakespeare is not used very heavily because you've already passed the turnoff that goes to the dump, and I guess the Otis Street, I don't know if it's only accessing the cemetery or if it continues on to other areas. Do you have any information on where those street, how, you know, the type of use and how heavily used?
Can anybody answer that concern?
This is Mary with Development Services. I believe both of those roads are local streets in that location. You know, it's the end of Scott and then Otis heading east doesn't continue any farther either. So it's, you have the cemetery to the south, which I'm sure has some traffic, you know, around a funeral, but not, you know, not regularly. So I think the traffic generally would be for a local street.
I think it's also important to point out, this is Keenan, that we received TIF funds in order to redo Otis and Shakespeare. So that's part of the project, is curb, gutter, sidewalk, and resurfacing of those streets with angled parking.
In addition to a trail that is the continuation of the trail system, this project is also incorporating that connection for the trail that is in the master plan. And it will run along Otis and Shakespeare Street.
And that reminded me of another question I had when I was reviewing this, and that was that the city plan, master plan, considered the expansion of the cemetery into some of this land. So will that not happen now? Or is there other area the cemetery can expand?
So the diocese owns the vacant lot next to the cemetery if they ever should want to expand. But I've been working closely with the diocese over the last few months. They are going to allow our construction team staging and lay down area on that vacant parcel. So, and then part of our work on Otis there is their hedge is actually in the right of way. So we'll be helping them out with that. So there's a nice partnership going on there, but I don't know specific plans about expansion, but they do have the space to do that should they choose.
Okay, thank you.
Not just the hedges, but the headstones are actually in the right of way, which was an interesting find.
This is Patrick again. I have just one quick follow-up. Sorry. The height, the additional height, where will the building stand in relation to the elevation of the interstate highway behind it?
Hey, Emily, can you show your graphic again of the building? That would be really helpful, I think.
Sure. This one, right?
So, well, if we can get there. There you go. So actually, you know, this embankment was used during the construction of 90, this big berm. And there's a pretty significant, you know, drop there in elevation down to where these buildings are sit. There's a retaining wall that runs along the back on this west side and then picks up and comes around on the east side to help us get that underground parking achieved. So we're still being towered by 90, but we're up there for sure.
Great, thanks. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't hear all of that since my internet connection isn't that strong. Are there other questions or comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, I will call for roll for favor and against.
Well, actually, don't we deliberate at some point? Don't we discuss?
Sandy, I don't know if you can hear me, but I also need to let you know that I see a guest waiting in the Zoom portal. So I'm not sure if you can see that and if you need to admit that person if they have any public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that there needed to be somebody that needed to be admitted. I thought I had already done that. Okay. Hans, I see you have your hand raised. Is there anyone else? Hans, did you have a comment?
I thought we traditionally deliberated, discussed amongst ourselves what
okay.
we think.
Certainly. Well, I thought that's what all the questions and comments were us discussing it among ourselves. But if you had other comments to say.
Well, then I would just like to add a comment that I was actually initially opposed to this based on simply the readings, but after having my questions answered and recognizing that only a small portion of this site is within the R145, then I think that their encroachments on zoning are very minimal, and that they have done everything they can to work within the zoning regulations and still provide the housing that the city wants and that the city is in support of it. So I've actually changed my mind and am now in support of the variance.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. This is Patrick. You know, seeing as how the majority of the parcels zoned in such a way where the only variance would be for the height, you know, in this part.
Hello, is anybody there?
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. I've been on hold the whole meeting trying to get in here. I was interested in making some comments if I could.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I live near the end of Scott Street here. What's that? Can you hear me okay?
Could you state your
Hello?
name, please?
Oh, yes, Steve Finley.
Okay, and your comments?
Okay, I had a number of concerns when I found out about this project, which was fairly recently, and I'll just try and go through them quickly, and you can address them as you like. This area back here, I've lived here for 18 years, and I can tell you that this area is used as a recreational area where people walk their dogs, they walk their kids, they run, they play, do exercise. People ride dirt bikes up there. So that's an area that I don't know if it's appropriate to have buildings in. Number two, having 200 apartments that fit nearly 800 people will increase the traffic going to the end of Scott Street and around to Otis so much that I think it's just going to be constant traffic back in this residential area. And I think it's going to be a lot more traffic than we should have back here, and that would pose a potential danger to both pedestrians and pets. Number three is the length of construction here and how noisy and disruptive that's going to be. I believe, if I'm understanding correctly, it takes a couple of years to do this project, and we are right back up against this hill, and it's going to be really noisy and disruptive, and it reflects sound back at us. And I imagine there's going to be road closures and everything, and I don't know if we'll even be able to get to our own parking lots. Number four is that with that amount of increased population back there, and I know there's going to be a little bit of underground parking, but we're going to obviously have clogged streets here with bumper to bumper cars parked along the streets now, which won't leave any room for current residents, guests, service vehicles, or anywhere to park on the street anymore. And lastly, the fifth point I have here is that these buildings will be towering over a cemetery just a few feet away from it. And a cemetery should obviously be a place of silence and solitude, and to have a 200-unit place with a bunch of cars and people going around that house nearly 800 people is going to be disruptive for the cemetery. So I would like to hear what you guys think of those 5 points. And I would like to also know, is there any possibility of stopping the project through petition or any other measures? Thank you.
I'd like to hear from the developers first, please.
Okay. I think that the cemetery, you have a good point on that one. I'm just going to kind of go backwards here because frankly, that was a lot. I understand you've lived there for 18 years and it's been this way for a long time, but we have started this project in 2018 and have done public process upon public process. And so I'm sorry that, you didn't pick up on it until last week because it's been in the press a lot over the last 2 years. We've worked closely with the diocese. The diocese was actually the original owner of this parcel and then sold it to the now owners, Madison Crossing, who are partners in this deal to make 200 units happen. They don't have a concern. And during our construction period, the contractor is actually going to work with them on the burials and scheduling those so that we're not being disruptive to that process. The diocese obviously has their own plans for the property that they've maintained across the street and in other areas of Missoula. So this lot, frankly, if we could go out and find a perfectly rectangle vacant lot in Missoula to put 200 units, we would. And if this project were easy, others would do it or have done it. We don't have anything like this in Missoula because it's not easy and there's no perfect space to put it. We're definitely working with the design to make it as efficient and to fit in with the neighborhood as we can, and to address your concerns of open space. There are open space requirements within the code that require us to address that outdoor lifestyle and parking and traffic and flow of people. We've been through all of that and we feel like we've qualified a lot of those, all of those requirements at this point, or we wouldn't be in front of this board asking for this variance with a fully vetted, site plan of how this property can work best.
I just want to address the parking concern because with the new road, Keenan, that you were talking about a second ago, we actually are creating more parking along that road, and it is angular parking, so you can fit more in there. So I feel like there is going to be a lot added to this area to mitigate that concern. So hopefully that helps. If you can see the site plan, I think you could count the number of spaces. I can't remember off the top of my head how many there are.
This is Mary McRae with Development Services. Also, each property owner, when they bring a project forward, has to meet the off-street parking standards that are in our zoning code, and this project meets the off-street standards. So any angled parking in the right-of-way is for visitors and guests and the public. So there will be substantial new parking with this project.
And I think, Mary, you're probably the best one to correct me if my impression is not right here.
Yeah,
but
I heard from both Jen and Joe. Okay, let's see if I have any other hands raised. If you could please raise your hand so I can acknowledge you. Okay, I see none.
This is Patrick. I'll just make a quick comment. Thanks for those comments from that member of the public. Just to clarify here, I think those concerns may be relevant to the larger project. This meeting is to discuss the variance request regarding the encroachments into the, well, basically not encroachments, sorry, the moving into the setbacks and the height restriction associated with the zoning. So those are really the only pieces of it that we're focused on at this meeting. And so I think the one you brought up about the height of the building and the cemetery is relevant. And the rest of that stuff that you mentioned is important to the project as a whole, but not really things that we're considering today from my perspective.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Can I call for roll or call for the vote, please?
Sandy,
Don't we need to make a motion first?
we do.
Oh,
Sandy.
yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We
And
do
Sandy has
need to
a-
have a motion first.
Sandy,
It's
as
been so long since I had a meeting.
as a point of order, Sandy, also, and Hans alluded to this earlier, but typically within the Board of Adjustment meetings, you've opened the public hearing and then we close the public hearing. And so what would be appropriate is to, if you're ready, to kind of close the public portion of the hearing and then to accept a motion and discussion and then vote.
Okay. Thank you. Like I say, it's been so long since we've had a meeting, I've forgotten how to hold one. So I will close the comment section of the agenda now. Or did I just hear another concern? Okay. Hearing none, could I hear a motion to either approve or reject the variance?
Would staff put the motion up on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, one sec. Technical difficulty here. Oh my goodness. There we go.
Perfect. I move the Board of Adjustment approve the variance requests by Blue Line Development and the Missoula Housing Authority to locate portions of Building A and Building B in the front street side setbacks and exceed the maximum required height of the RM 1-45 district on the property legally described as Tract 22 and Block 23 and 24 in School 5 acre, which is a 3.67 acre parcel, and portion of Beacon Street vacated in Section 16, Township 13 North, Range 19 West, Principal Meridian, Montana, and an 80-foot width of Scott Street right-of-way north of Otis Street, based on the applicant's packet, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and comments received today as established in the staff report.
I second.
Can I please know who seconded that motion?
Hans Hoffman.
Thank you.
Maybe I didn't, okay, there's been a motion and a second for approval of these variances. Could I have a roll call of the attendees, please, on the vote?
If there's no other discussion on the motion, Sandy Mitchell,
Aye.
Patrick Bradigam,
Aye.
Hans Hoffman,
Aye.
John Newman,
Aye.
Sharon Gordon. Sharon, I believe you're muted. Okay, try again, Sharon.
Okay, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Don Briggs.
Aye.
Fantastic. We have a unanimous vote. Only 4 are required to pass a motion.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is nomination of officers, chair and vice chair positions. The actual election of officers will occur at a September meeting. But if there is anybody interested in being one of these officers, I would certainly like to hear from you now. Should we appoint a little committee to poll people later on?
Hans Offland would be proud to serve as either chair or vice chair.
Thank you, Hans. I really appreciate that. Obviously, I am not good with this technical stuff. If this is going to be the future, I feel a little uncomfortable here. Anybody else interested in serving?
I am willing to serve as the vice chair, but don't feel like I'm in a position to take on the duties of chair at this point in time.
I can assure you I understand that completely. Well, Hans, would you mind being chair and John vice chair and starting in September?
Do we need a motion for that?
We have the election in September, as I understand it. So I'm not sure. I guess I need to defer to staff here. What is the procedure according to our bylaws?
Yes, please, because we missed our September meeting. So this is the first meeting since September. So we should take a motion on that nomination.
I see. I see.
This is
So
Patrick. I'll move to nominate Hans as the chair and John as the vice chair.
And I will second that. Okay. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Thank you for that second. Okay, so could we call the roll again, please?
Yes.
Should we do votes for individual members simply because I'm not inclined to vote for myself?
I truly don't know what the procedure should be.
Maybe that's just picayune, but
we have a slate of officers. You're voting for that. How's that?
Okay. A vice chair who shall remain nameless.
Yes.
Since we're unopposed, I don't think this is going to be a contentious vote.
I don't think so either.
Thank you.
I don't want to be accused of improper influence or anything, you know?
Right, yes.
Sandy, you can just call for, all in favor would be appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, we have a new slate of officers starting next month or whenever our next meeting is. And for the next year, or do we have to go through this again in September?
We'll go through it again in September.
Great, okay.
Alicia, should I announce the reappointments? I was supposed to do that during staff announcements, but I don't know if I missed my window.
No, as long as the chair is willing, that's appropriate, just to inform people. It's not, hasn't been voted on yet by council, but I think it's a great communication.
Okay. Is that okay?
Okay, please go ahead.
Great. The mayor is reappointing Lance Koch, Patrick Brittingham, John Newman, Caitlin Hepburn, and Don Briggs.
Okay, great.
That was...
Is there any other business to come before the board? Okay, hearing none, I believe this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Nice job, Sandy.
Oh, yeah, well,
That's a
it's
tough
true.
one.
yeah, we have a new president next meeting, so. Thank you very
Bye.
much, Sharon.
Bye-bye.
This is Don. It's been good to meet you folks.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
same
same
here.
here,
Looking forward to
Don.
working. Yeah, we'll work together in the future. Thank you.
You bet.